without further ado, I will hand things over to Carrie Strickland to kick today's webinar off.
Great. Thank you, Shane. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Global Access Strategy and Opportunities in Sanitation. Over the next hour, we're going to discuss how Firmenich, the world's largest private fragrance and scent company, has partnered with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to improve sanitation. Before we dive into the content, a couple housekeeping items. First of all, I'd like to mention that this webinar will be recorded so that we can share it on the STEP website, and you'll also all receive a link to the webinar materials and a survey after the webinar. Audio will be broadcast over your computer speakers, as Shane has covered. Everyone's been muted, so as you have questions, please use the chat window there on the left. I encourage you to test out the chat box now by just saying hello, good morning, or good afternoon to everyone. And if you have a question throughout, feel free. The webinar today is being brought to you by the Sanitation Technology Platform, known as STEP. We're a program of the Innovation Advisors Group at RTI International, largely funded and supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm Carrie Strickland, part of the Innovation Advisors team and the Deputy Director of STEP. I'm joined today by Sarah Darbeloff, the Director of Global Technology Business Development at Firmenich. Welcome, Sarah.
So thank you very much, Carrie. Thanks for having me, and hi to everybody online.
We are happy to have you. Excited for you to share with our audience about Firmenich's work in sanitation. For those of you who might not know, the partnership between Firmenich and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation goes back to 2013. One aspect of their partnership, as with all partners of the Gates Foundation, is their commitment to global access. So global access means that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation asks all of their grantees and partners, like Firmenich, to make a commitment to global access, which includes ensuring that products and information generated by foundation funding are widely available at an affordable price, and in a time frame that benefits those in need. Firmenich has been a great example of how an organization can develop and execute on a strategy to achieve this global access goal. So I'm really excited for all of you to hear from Sarah on that today. As I've gotten into the details of what they've been able to achieve, I think it's really interesting and a great example that should be inspiring for all of you. So we'd love to learn a little bit about you, our audience, as we get started. We have a couple of poll questions for you. Your responses will help Sarah and I frame today's information and help inform us about future webinars. So the first one you should see here, how did you hear about this webinar? And lots of folks already chiming in, which is great. All right, and the second one is, how would you describe your current role? All right, great. Thanks, everyone. This is really helpful and gives us good insight. So at this point in the webinar, I'm going to hand it off first to Sarah to kind of get us all up to speed on the work that Firmenich has been doing in sanitation. Then after that, I'll put a few questions to her about how Firmenich has adapted their business model to meet the global access commitment. And then at the end, we'll be sure to leave some time for your questions as well. So please be thinking of questions as we go along. And with that, Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kerry. I'll just move forward to where we want to be. Great. So thank you for that great introduction. It's delighted to have this opportunity to connect with all of you. As Kerry mentioned, the focus of this webinar is about global access terms, and in the Q&A section after this, we will talk a little bit more detail about how Firmenich managed to achieve that with our clients. But I want to take this first 15 minutes to kind of give you a background as to why Firmenich involved and what are we doing in the space of sanitation. So you would have seen my title is around Global Business Development of Technologies, which means that within Firmenich, I look after our portfolio of fragrance technologies, which go into multiple home and body care products that you yourselves probably use. And really, I'm involved on the deployment side, so taking the technologies and really ensuring they're getting to their clients and they're getting to the right markets at the right price. And under that comes this particular technology around odor, which falls under the portfolio that I manage, hence my involvement. But stepping back a little bit, you may not be aware of who Firmenich are because we're sort of a company behind a company. We work with the majority of the big global players in the world, and we fragrance many different brands that you would have heard of, from Tide to Omo, or Harpic to Pantene to Lux, and the fine fragrance brands, Calvin Klein, Dolce & Gabbana. And we have a rich history of creating fragrances and indeed flavors for over 125 years for all types of consumer products. So you might be thinking, well, why on earth is a fragrance house that may seem, miles away from this world of sanitation, why are we involved in this area of sanitation and reinvented toilets and so forth? I've been involved now in the sector through this deployment of the technology for the last 3 years, and I've seen really how much fantastic hardware there is out there. And I had the pleasure of being at the X-Gates Expo in China, which I see some people online were as well. And I saw your fantastic revolutionary toilet designs and smart processors and intelligent systems, which is obviously at the core of delivering a sanitation solution. What we're trying to bring is the inverted commas, the software, the emotional side, and which we really believe is key to driving behavioral change in the sanitation space. We all know the importance of fragrances and scent in our everyday lives. If you think of the pleasure that you get from a flower garden or cut grass, or you walk past a bakery and the smell of bread, or the scent of our mother's skin when we were growing up, it's a real trigger for an emotional reaction when we smell. And in the context of toilets, scent is also very important. And I'm sure you would have heard this or should know. And in a consumer study that we've done in the past, and recently again in a big new study that we've done over 10 countries recently in a part of a grant that we're doing with the Gates Foundation, we again had this message reinforced, that one of the main barriers to use and why one of the main continued reasons for open defecation is the lack of cleanliness and the bad smells, both in public toilets and even sometimes in home toilets. And in fact, in some of the recent surveys that we've done, up to 70% of people have said that they would pay more to use a clean, fresh, nice smelling toilet. So you can build 1,000 toilets and you can create as many government mandates as you want, but if you don't maintain them and clean them, and if they don't smell good, then it's only solving part of the problem, and they will not get used as much as they deserve to be. Which brings us to Firmenich and what we call science with purpose. So it's what we were trying to, not just science for the sake of patents and publications, but really to try and bring something that can help, in this case, save lives. We've been working in the space of malodor control for 80 years, but in the last 7-8 years, we've been really focusing around this part of receptor-based discovery. And I will talk a little bit more about what that means scientifically. And Bill Gates, who is both a visionary and a practical man, he realized quite soon into his program on sanitation that if you have a bad toilet, as I said, you won't use it. So he approached us and asked if we could collaborate and help with that last piece of the jigsaw, which was about making it smell good. So the last 5 years of our work really has been focusing on trying to find a fragrance solution based around this cutting edge science of receptor technology, as well, and this is key to ensuring that the fragrance is liked, because if I give you a fragrance that's performing but you don't like the smell, then you're not going to use it either. So it's that balance between the liking and the performance which was key. And the project took sort of place within, it's a threefold stage project, I would say. The first part was really to understand what was the smell like in the various toilets that exists in different parts of the world. So we did an extensive field testing across 5 locations, here focused initially, as you can see, on India and Africa, and expanding into other countries in the last year or so. And it was to really go onto the ground and go and smell and chemically analyze and do some testing to really understand what was at the heart of the bad smells that the consumers, the users of the toilets were experiencing. What are the components that make up that smell? And that turned out to be 5 different key chemical components. You might ask the question, does that vary by country or by diet, by region, by zone? It does to a certain extent, but there's still enough commonality that those 5 key chemicals were present at some form across all the toilets that were analyzed. So that was the first stage, is what are we trying to target? And we then created a synthetic reproduction. So the labs, Firmenich laboratories, created a chemical synthetic version of those bad smells to make sure it was representative for us to begin our testing on. And that was taken back to the ground, back to the people in India and Africa and then China and South America to say, are they actually convinced and do they believe that it is actually similar to what they smell themselves and experience? And where they weren't convinced, it was further adapted and modified to make it as accurate as possible. And then was the science part. So it's great to say that we have something that smells representative of the sort of fecal urine smelt in the latrines, but we have to find a solution that helps us to counteract it. And this is this whole area we talk about of receptor-based discovery. And what we're trying to do really is really move step change on in the way that a product performs in covering odors or in reducing odors. I'm sure all aware in your everyday lives, when you go to the supermarkets, you find many products that are positioned and claimed to work against household odors or body odors and so forth. Twofold for us. We wanted something that was specifically working extremely well at the types of odors that we see in the toilets and latrine, and 2, something that was a step change, I said, in terms of how well it performs versus the kind of products that already exist on the market. And by helping us to understand, a whole program helping us to understand the receptors, what's happening in the nose, how do we smell, that was really the big link and the big step forward we were able to make. So to be able to explain simply how the process behind how the science is, if you were to sort of cut open your nose and look at it under a microscope, there would be something what we call receptors. So there's many, many little pockets. There's about 400 in our nose, we all have. And every time we smell something, certain receptors in these little pockets are activated by the smell and send a signal to our brain saying it smells of rose or chamomile or an unpleasant smell. And it gives us a reaction. We like it or we don't like it. So it was the science of the work, the bulk of the work that was done over the 5 years was to understand which receptors are activated by the bad smells in the toilets. So out of those chemical components, I said we had isolated which receptors were activated. And if you think of a sort of a typical electronic circuit board that you might have, for a computer, and a pathway that's being lit up, think of the nose like that. So what pathway was being lit up from the nose to the brain, depending on when we smelled the fecal odor. And once that was identified and the subsection of receptors that were activated, we then looked for solutions. We looked for certain kinds of molecules that would selectively block the receptors so that you don't smell the bad smell anymore. And this, as you can see from this diagram here, there you have the fecal odor that's blocking the receptor that's activated by it. And what we want to do instead is have what we call an antagonist. An antagonist is the word for a molecule that blocks and stops you smelling, that will selectively get to your nose first, stop you smelling the bad odors, and allow you to smell instead a really nice fragrance. So it's a sort of a dual system. Block the bad odor, bring some good smell. We are not, I would just to reassure you, we're not physiologically changing your nose. The minute you extract yourself from the environment of the smell, the antagonist detaches and you go, but your nose remains as it was before. But it was this link and this understanding of which were the parts of the nose that were activated and which were the antagonists that would help to counteract the bad smell that helped us to design a fragrance that was much more effective against these target malodors than systems that existed before. And that was the breakthrough that we spent 5 years working, was part of the foundation and the grant that we received from the foundation. And then once that part was done, the third and most important part really was working with partners to get it to market. It's all very well Firmenich creating a fragrance oil and has a technology inside, but a fragrance has to go somewhere. It doesn't just exist on its own. So it needs an application. And that application can come in different forms. It could be a cleaning powder. It could be a bleach type or non-bleach powder. It could be a liquid cleaner as well. It could be an air freshener, a cellulose type of paper or a thick cardboard air freshener where the fragrance is impregnated on top. It could be a pump spray. There's some examples, but there are other types as well. It could be a pit product that degrades fecal matter in your pit latrine. The key point for us and for you to know is that the fragrance must be used in conjunction with cleaning or addressing the fecal waste. So I said through a cleaner, through an air freshener that's used in conjunction with cleaning and so forth. Because if we remove odors without tackling the odor source, then we're not improving sanitation. We're basically just giving a fake environment where the consumer is not getting the best hygienic solution. So it's a combination of this smell with the cleaning aspect is the heart of what our proposition is. And then we looked at our business streams, or our distribution models, I should say, of where we've been looking to deploy this technology. And we split that into 3 sort of segments. The first is what we would say through our normal client channels that we have, clients that we work with on standard mass market projects, where we had to really work with them to develop an affordable product for low-income consumers. And it's that first channel 1 is really where the global access terms was most negotiated, and where when we talk about global access in a few minutes, it's really in that context of applying this to our client base. Then the second would be public toilet cleaning. So this would be any of the organizations that are mandated or are asked through the government or through sanipreneurs to do the cleaning, local to get in there and to bring the product to them so that they use it for a better cleaning experience. And finally, directly with sanipreneurs that either been identified through the Gates Foundation or the Toilet Board Coalition, as Firmenich is a founding member of the Toilet Board Coalition, to help integrate the fragrance directly into the solutions that they are developing. And we have a range of projects going on. I just want to mention 3 or 4 so you get a feel for the kind of areas that we will work in. And here and by there, segregated again by business streams. And you can see it's an example of a global client. So Reckitt Benckiser, Harpic, a well-known brand. So they launched a powder toilet cleaner in Bangladesh. And that really is a sachet specifically targeting low-income consumers for use in their home. And this will be expanded across to other countries beyond Bangladesh as part of their rollout. And they're also looking at rolling out into other formats as well. So here, this is a local client. So this would be Amca, who's a client in South Africa, and they have a pit treatment product. So you throw it into the hole in the center of the pit, and it helps over time to degrade the fecal matter in the pit, so you have more room to add more, and it can be used for longer. And that contains the fragrance of the technology as well. And this would be with sanipreneurs. So the one that's most advanced is with Saraplast in India. And they have buses that are specifically targeted as giving toilet solutions for women. And inside these toilets, which are regularly cleaned, we have hanging air fresheners with the counteracting solution, the fragrance, and the technology as well. And then 2 recent sanipreneurs that we're working with is Lutel in India and Live Clean in Africa. And they have public toilets, smaller or larger number of blocks, which are again regularly cleaned. But they're adding the fragrance on top for an extra experience. So to deal with any lingering odors that might be in the air, even if the toilets are clean, and to give it a plus plus. So it's not just about odors, but also an experience that offers a great hedonic moment for the user of the toilet. So I think that sort of finalizes my message on this part, really, is to say that, you know, though it's, as I said, not the key part of this webinar, I want to remind people that scent with odor neutralization is a key component in the whole cycle of sanitation, and it can help drive market and business opportunities, because the best sanitation solution will offer the best experience across all aspects: ease of access, of use, waste management, cleanliness, and scent, so that the people will go back, and it'll drive increased footfall and ultimately lead to better and safer lives. So that completes my part here. So Kerry, I'll hand over to you.
Wonderful. Yes, that's great. Thank you, Sarah. It's great to see these products are already starting to penetrate the market and reach base of pyramid consumers. I think that's really exciting and a great success, and I know there's a lot more to come from you all in that area. So now that we're all together up to speed on the technology, I'd like to shift us back to discussing global access for a few minutes. So as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, global access is a commitment required of grantees and partners of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And what it means is, in alignment with the mission of the foundation, partners commit to making the products and information generated by foundation funding widely available at an affordable price and in a time frame that benefit those in need. Of course, these concepts of affordable price, efficient volume and quality, reasonable time frame, these are all context specific. Right? And the technology solutions and markets that partners like some of you on the line are targeting vary widely. And the framework of the global access commitment, I think, leaves space for this variety, leaves space for you as partners to be creative in how you meet this commitment. So answers about if you're on the line and you have specific global access questions, I think answers about your specific requirements can really only come through conversation with your Gates Foundation counterparts. So we won't be able to address any specific questions today. Instead, I think what will be really helpful is our objective is to share with you Firmenich's experience in meeting their global access requirement and let that inspire your creativity about what you might do. So Sarah, I'd love to start with helping everyone understand a little bit the typical process for partnering between Firmenich and your traditional clients in the fragrance and flavor industry. How does this normally work?
Okay, so we have to remember we're working usually with clients who are in a highly competitive market. They really are there to try and, you know, the benchmark of what they want to do is get more market share or grow quicker, you know, sort of really capture the consumer more than their competitor, be it global to global, local to local, and now even more we see globals competing against locals because locals are really challenging the big space owned by globals. So for us, we have to sort of many times adapt to that client strategy that they have, and very often we don't get a chance to sort of modify their strategy. And typically what happens is we receive what we call a brief or a project where they say to us, we need a fragrance, here it says shampoo, it could be detergent or soap bar, anything, right? We need it to be this price, it needs to have this sort of smell, and it's for this type of consumer. And they give us a period of time, 2-3 months maybe, to develop a fragrance, sometimes less. And we are working against competitors. It's Firmenich and our other fragrance competitors. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5, all striving to achieve the targets, the KPIs that our clients have set us. We all submit. It goes into a test program. The client will test intensively against certain benchmark standards that they have, and at the end they declare a winner. And then there's always a negotiation on price, so they can get the best deal, and for us and we try and obviously balance to keep our margins looking good as well. So it's a pretty challenging environment. As I said, we don't get much chance really to influence our clients on this. The other aspect to consider is that very often, because we are in this competitive environment, our clients will ask for exclusivity. be it on the fragrance or the technology, because they want to be different. They want to own something that their other competitors don't. They want to be fast. They want to be first to market. And so they really would like to own something, so exclusively, or they perhaps want to have our IP or have the possibility to be able to patent around our original core technology, patent the application, patent its usage in a certain field or a certain area. So we end up with quite a lot of conditions that really, if you think about that in a basic pyramid sort of target market, it's not something that would be very helpful. And then you think about affordability, as we said. Here, these products mainly in our business model are for consumers who have a little bit more money and they're able to afford it. So price can be a real differentiator. So we have to really think, how does that fit again in global access? Trying to get the client into the mindset that here it's not about making as much money as possible, but delivering something that's affordable to that basic pyramid target consumer was also a challenge as well. And a final point on speed to market. Particularly for the globals, that can be slow. It can be 2, 3, sometimes even 4 years in terms of the cycle of the original brief all the way through to market launch. Quicker with local clients, maybe 1 to 2 years. But still for us, really to meet the foundation's visions and for our own commitment to sanitation, that's slow. We really wanted to get there, within sort of 6 months to a year, really, if we could. So with these 3 challenges in mind, we really had to try to think, how could we get our clients excited, get them on board, but challenge the status quo that we normally worked at. So we came to the conclusion that we would need a dual business model. One, to satisfy our existing fragrance brief process and our corporate financial objectives, and a new one, really only for global access purposes. That was really, as I said, striving to comply to the areas that you said about, freedom to operate, no restrictions on use, advantageous commercial terms, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great, sure, yeah, that makes sense, and lots of challenges to overcome for certain. So let's talk a little bit about the global access specific business model of the two. And the idea of advantaged commercial terms, how did that all work?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of this advantaged commercial terms really was, as I said, to make it more affordable. So as we mentioned before, our clients' main thing is to drive their market share. So they want to be offering products, particularly if we're including innovation technology, which we are doing here. Usually the point of deploying innovation or technology into a product is that the client could then offer it at an increased price on the market. It's a way of stretching the value proposition. It's the way, I'm going to be, being honest, the way Firmenich would increase our margins as well through the role of innovation. Clients, as I said, want to increase their market share. So this involved a new mindset, really, as we said, to be able to think that what could they do with innovation and technology, quite breakthrough science, but was not going to be offered at a premium price. So the way the Firmenich did it was we tried to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So we said to them, we are prepared to significantly reduce our margins. This is not where we're looking to make our money, and offer you the fragrance. And a fragrance is often a large part of the value proposition of a product. So if it's a toilet cleaner, for example, the product formulation is normally pretty cheap, and the fragrance can often be a more expensive part. So us, by significantly reducing the cost of our fragrance and making it much more appealing for our clients, they were then able to reformulate their home product at a cheaper cost, and therefore be able to offer it at an affordable price for the BOP consumers. So that really sort of helped with overcoming some of the issues about the IP and the exclusivity that were not available, by really showing our commitment up front that we were prepared to reduce our margins, encouraging them to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Great. And in return, you expected a couple things from them, right? In the qualifying letter and the materials transfer agreement.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we kind of wanted to frame them into a sort of, so that there was no ambiguity. So there was something that they could clearly commit to from the start. They knew the rules, they knew what they needed to operate to, our commitment both sides, and it added us a certain framework which helped with that sort of partnership approach. So we put 2 documents in place. One was what we call an MTA, a material transfer agreement, and that was to really address this issue of IP. So our partners, our global clients, have to sign the MTA before they even received a sample of the technology. And in that, they had to agree not to analyze it, and not to patent around it. And that was really because I can tell you with some of our global clients, it is the norm that they would automatically try and work out what's in there and see how they can patent. It's just the way business works, and they want to try and see if they can get an advantage from it. So this took a lot of negotiation for them to understand why it couldn't be the case. And we really had to explain to them that by doing this and by stopping their need to patent and own, if they were going to do that, it would then prevent the use of the technology by all other clients. Because if client X puts a patent on something or an ownership, client Y, Z, A, B would not be able to access, which would go against the fundamental principles of what the foundation were trying to achieve and would stop freedom to operate. So that was the first part, was the MTA. And the second part was what we qualifying letter. And that was pretty interesting, actually, because that really asked our partners up front to outline their case for what they were trying to do and achieve. So it's not just enough to verbally tell us, yeah, give us your fragrance cheap and we will put it into a product. Because, we didn't want them to take the risk of getting a good fragrance that we've done our best to target sanitation, and then they use it in a mass market product. So they had to commit with a qualifying letter that said the product would be affordable. Why is it affordable? It's cheaper than current, it's better use rate, and so forth, and how it would be targeting the basic pyramid consumer and helping to address the sanitation solution. And that was really effective because it helped actually the customers to formalize their vision. So especially for some of the local clients who are perhaps not so used to putting formalized strategies in place, by helping them write the letter, it really got them to think themselves of what they were trying to achieve. Who were they targeting? How would they get to base of pyramid? And what would that sort of project look like in terms of needs and objectives? And also the formality of the letter and the awareness that it was going to be approved by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, because they submitted the letter to us, we sent it through to the foundation. So we'll look at it and say, yes, we believe that this is in the right spirit of it. That really helped them to commit. So they couldn't just, as I said, give us lip service. They actually knew that they were committing, and it generated a higher level of commitment within the clients.
That's great. That's great. I especially like that concept of the qualifying letter because we know in innovation how crucial management buy-in is for success, right? If we're doing something new, organization management has to be bought in. And I have to imagine for a letter like that, it perhaps elevated it in the client organization.
For sure.
So then when we think about the second of the two dual business models, these clients were also able to take the fragrance and the technology to mass market under certain conditions, right? So let's walk through how that works.
So this is what you're saying, that we kind of came up with an incentive, I think you would say, that we had what we said to, because this science was breakthrough and was offering something really an improvement to malodor control. Clearly, all our clients working in mass market space heard about it and said, well, why can't I have it for my regular products? Which is not what we committed to the foundation and not what we wanted to achieve ourselves. So we put like a carrot in there, and we said, if you are prepared to commit to a sanitation project that really delivers for BOP consumers to help all of us achieve our objectives, you can have access to the technology as well for mass market. Clearly at different commercial terms, because the advantageous commercial terms would be for the BOP, and then would have regular commercial terms for mass market. But it's not that we wanted to force them into sanitation, but it gave them that extra incentive. It made them step up and say, okay, we will commit to doing a product for Bangladesh or for India or South Africa. And that then said, okay, fine, we're doing that. And they had to show not just, again, commitment to a letter. They had to give us a timeline. They had to show that there was a proper project in place, and the project had to have gone a certain distance. And once we saw that there was a real commitment, we then allowed them to access the technology for mass market. For those clients who are not in the space of sanitation or were not interested in it, they had to wait 18 months. There was an 18 months lag, which at that point, after we'd finalized our commitment to the foundation, they were able to access the technology. But certainly having that carrot and stick approach really did help push some of those clients who were wavering to step over the line, because we all want what we don't have, and that sort of kind of door opener of being able to have it for mass really did help to drive things quicker.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And this idea of a successful qualifying project, was it a challenge working with clients to get them to the point where they could define what a successful qualifying project would be, or did that
Yeah,
go
we
pretty
yeah we
smoothly?
did have quite a lot of discussions on that. As I said, it wasn't just the letter. That was one stage, and the letter was approved. But we wanted to make sure that, the minute the letter was signed, they weren't just sort of stepping back from the commitment. We went a road down. We wanted to see that they had actually a team in place, that they had an idea on the format that they wanted to work on, that we'd started developing fragrances for it, that we knew the test program they wanted to put into place. So we went down a certain road. So there was a little bit of back and forth, and there was some teething problems, but we were able within, I would say, a 3-month period to be able to get the
Hmm.
commitment we needed to be able to move to the next stage.
Great, great. That's good. Well, I appreciate all your insights. It's a really interesting model, and I'm so glad to hear that it's been successful for you all. So we're going to transition here at this point in the webinar to some questions from the audience. So please, everyone, if you haven't already, if you have questions for Sarah or I to answer, um, type them over in the chat box. If you think of them later, you can certainly contact us afterwards as well. Sarah, as folks are thinking about their questions and those are coming in, I thought I would just ask you if there are folks on the line who are technology developers who are working on developing their own global access strategy. Do you have kind of any tips or sort of key learnings, things you would highlight for them about your experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. So thinking about it, I guess the first thing is really you need to think about a process. What I explained before, what I talked through, it didn't just come about, just sort of out of our heads in 2 minutes. We did think of quite a structured process. But what's critical really is that process may not fit every client and everybody here that you're dealing with in your sanitation space. So my message, I think, would be not one deal fits all. Really understanding your client specific business model and what is that difficulty that deviates it from the standard model is critical. So for us, we had to really think, well, what are the blocks between this BOP model versus our regular business? And as I said, it was the IP, it was the affordability, it was the speed. And once we knew those up front, we then thought, well, how do we proactively address those situations from the start, so that when we go to our clients, we've thought in advance of the hurdles that we're going to come across. So it's structured, but really adapted to what your client model is and where you think that the most bottlenecks are going to be.
Mm.
Then for our specific one, and this may not be relevant again for everyone, there's this whole conversation on testing. And I don't know how, with hardware, how it's tested, but in classic projects that we work, clients will take their product and test it in classic market conditions. So, a shampoo for Indonesia, they take it to the consumers and they test it to death, and they answer 50 questions and they have to use it at home versus for other products. It's quite complex, it's quite involved, it involves a certain level of understanding and knowledge. So trying to test products at BOP consumers with that sort of high level is really not relevant and not going to give you the feedback you want. So we had to work a lot with them to understand what is the way to really pull out the feedback. How do we ask, somebody, a low income consumer, basic pyramid consumer, India and Africa, if they're happy with it? What's a simple way and simple mechanism for getting their feedback and to adapt the solution to be better? So we had a lot of engagement on don't use your business as normal testing protocols and your business as normal processes to apply that to basic pyramid, because it's a very different ballgame that we're in. And one point really I would say is that engaging with top management, that was also another point I would think is a good one for all to consider, is speak to the right people. We found when we were engaging with our day-to-day project or brand people, they have their own typical agenda, their project pipelines for the next 2-3 years, and they're quite complex and slow. And they were not often willing to break away from that to fit a new project into this plan. But with the top management, who this speaks to, it speaks to them to want to be engaged in sanitation for the company's own goals, for their own reasons of involvement and so forth. The more we engaged with them, that top-down approach to their teams and said, We want to get this moving. It is part of our commitment as a company. Really helped it to go faster and really, made the projects move more successfully to the end.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's really helpful. Thanks. I see that we do have a question from Chelsea Wald. I think she would like to hear a little more about the partnership and the activities going on with Saraplast. Is there more that you are able to share about that ongoing work?
Yeah, sure, with pleasure. So Saraplast was they're a sub-arm of so the TI buses, sorry, I should say, is a sub-arm of Saraplast's larger sanitation initiatives. This is something that came about through our partnership part of I mentioned the Toilet Bowl Coalition, and Firmenich is one of the founding members. We have what we call cohorts. They're sanipreneurs that we sponsor, so to speak, to be more successfully reaching the market targets that they want. And Saraplast was one of these that started to work with us 2.5 years ago now. They have buses. They have at the moment, I think, about 12. They take old buses, which they've converted into toilets for women. They're static buses. Really, their aim is not to move. And they have a good system of cleaning already. They have a mixture of both pit toilets and flush toilets. And they were looking to improve the experience for the consumer. So the woman goes there. She has a great toilet. She also has other facilities there as well, whether it's Wi-Fi or sanitary products and changing facilities for the baby. And she also would have the best experience in terms of scent. So they asked us to provide with the best solution for them, which was easy to use, were a cellulose pad. A cellulose pad is like a thick cardboard, which was impregnated with our fragrance with the technology. And a pad was hung in each of the toilet cubicles, both on the pit and the flush toilets, and providing a constant emanating smell of good fragrance with the odor control as well for any airborne odors. So that project involved us really understanding what were the conditions in the buses, the temperature, the how often they're being cleaned, how strong is the odor, what fragrances are liked. So we worked over a 6-month period, really back and forth, testing what we were sending them. Is it efficient? Does it last long enough? Is it covering the odor? Is it liked? And we came to a final solution, which is really working well now. So much so that as the bus door is open, some of the fragrance emanates onto the street. And people were saying that as they walk by, they were attracted by the smell of the scent on the street coming from the bus, which encouraged them to go in and use the toilet, which, as you can imagine, is the perfect point of what we're trying to achieve. To drive usage, and then obviously for that sanipreneur, they're driving their income stream as well because they're getting increased footfall. So that's a successful example of a smallish initiative that's helping to achieve our objectives.
Great, that's really helpful. When we talk a little bit more about your kind of process of working with your clients through these global access negotiations, I wonder about kind of level of effort, how much work that took in that time period. Was it almost a full-time commitment in your job, or was it half of your role, or what do you think it takes to do it successfully?
It's difficult to quantify, I guess, particularly. So we haven't got the luxury of having a sanitation specific team within Firmenich. We have those of us who take it on as part of our additional job on top of others. It fell under, as I mentioned, my business development guy title anyhow, as part of getting technologies to market. If I had to quantify the time during the most intensive period, I would probably say it was about 40 to 50% of my time during the most intensive. And then there's periods when it dropped off, but at its height, I would say probably 40 to 50%.
And did you find your experience engaging with the large multinationals and the smaller, more local organizations, was that experience really different, or was it more the same?
That is a good point as well. I think that's again reflected in our regular business, is that global companies, I think I referred to this before, are slow. They do have longer processes, longer pipelines, their validation processes are longer. People change within the company and start again. So certainly speed to market was a challenge with global clients. There's no doubt with their organizational structures. Whereas local clients, they have flexibility to move quicker. Sometimes it's a private company. The owner is the guy who makes the decision. The owner says, I want it. and everyone does it, and within 6 months
Mm-hmm.
you have a solution. So certainly, and I guess that's something the world over, and not just in our business, is that the locals have more flexibility. So it's a bit of both. The globals will hit a larger market and will get their brands out to more people, but are slower, and the locals are smaller but faster. So it's good to have a mix of both, I think, in your portfolio.
Sure. Yeah. Well, great. Thank you. Sarah, I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. I think it's been a great session. I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure it's been helpful for our audience as well, to spend some time thinking about this global access strategy and hear how your team has been successful in implementing it. So for the audience, if you want to learn more about Firmenich's story and what we've talked about today, I'd encourage you to look at some of the other materials that are out there on what they've been doing. You can read about the technology in STEP's technology directory. There's also a recent case study from the Wharton School of Business that's a good read, has some more technical info on the technology that we didn't cover today. And there's a fairly recent podcast with Firmenich's CEO that was also with Wharton discussing the case study. So if you prefer to listen rather than to read, you can go there. If you want to know more from us at the Sanitation Technology Platform, I know some of you in the audience are probably familiar with our resources already. If you haven't spent some time taking a look at our resources center, the link is there on the website. There are over 50 public market intelligence documents that cover sanitation in different markets that can help you think about how to accelerate commercialization and reach your market. If you have any lingering questions about the presentation today, you're welcome to reach out to us and we will help coordinate with Sarah and get those answered for you. We're always happy to help you, our audience, leverage any of our resources that are on our website. So if you ever have questions about things, feel free to let us know. And again, thank you all in the audience for joining, and thanks to Sarah for sharing with us today.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks all, and thanks Shane and Cameron for hosting for us.